It's all here. The examination proves that Flora's a virgin and is actually very ill. George and his family and the whole nation are outraged by Victoria's treatment of poor Flora. Listen to this from the Morning Post. Lady Flora Hastings endures with patience and resignation the anguish of a wounded spirit. A virtuous and amiable lady destroyed in the flower of her days by the slanders and the insults of court minions. Of course, they couldn't actually criticise the Queen openly, but everyone knew what the phrase court minions really referred to. This incident ended the young Victoria's honeymoon period with the British public. This is the dramatic moment in history when our alternative royal family dared to stand up to the person on the throne. Not only that, but the people mobilised behind them. Crowds jeered and hissed Victoria. Eggs were thrown at her carriage. This is big news. This is the Watergate of its time. Imagine it, when Princess Di died in the car crash and the Queen's popularity was at its lowest, no one actually took to the streets. But here, with this incident of the eggs, you can see the level of public outrage. But it got even worse because in the July, Flora died of liver cancer. Here's her obituary just there. Public now were at boiling point. Queen Victoria could scarcely go out of the palace, whereas Flora was regarded as a victim, some kind of martyr figure almost. But what the newspapers can't show you is what was going on in private. Her brother George challenged Lord Melbourne, who was the Queen's chief representative, to a duel. He couldn't challenge the Queen herself, of course, because she was a woman. In other words, here you've got our Plantagenet George IV going head-to-head with the chief representative of the heir to the Tudor throne. In the event, the duel never took place, but the tragedy was neither forgiven nor forgotten by the Hastings family. They issued their own stamps in her memory. Flora was buried in state at Loudon. The Union flag was never flown again over the castle. The publicity about Flora made my research easier. But later on in Victoria's reign, our alternative royal family were hit by a massive change in their fortunes. In a dramatic twist of fate, the noble Plantagenets were torn off their pedestal. It was an event that totally transformed my search for the person who should be on the throne today. This was the man responsible. Henry Waysford Charles Plantagenet Rawdon Hastings. He was, frankly, a bounder. He even stole his friend's fiancée, but he had only one real love in his life. Henry was married to the track. As soon as he came of age, he started to run horses and bet heavily. Can I have tenner to win on Turner?
Number 7, £10.
If I wanted to make a really big bet here, would you take it?
It depends how big a bet you're talking about, really.
$5.5 million.
I think you might struggle, certainly a good one anyway. I've never heard of anyone asking for a bet bigger than £1 million, but there was somebody asked for £1 million bet last year.
What would you think of someone who put £5.5 million on the horse?
I think they've either got too much money or they're just trying to get rid of some for somebody else.
Well, that's exactly what Henry Hastings did. He'd already spent virtually all of the family fortune, about £100 million in today's money. He just got £120,000 left. That's £5.5 million today. And he put it all on one horse in one race to win. It was the 22nd of May, 1867, the Derby. Henry had backed the odds-on favourite, the Dun. They were off. Right from the start, the Dun was in the lead. All the way round, he was leading. Then in the final furlong, a rank outsider called the Hermit started to gain ground. With every step, he got closer. The line, the Hermit won by a neck. The sport of kings had destroyed our King Henry X. By the age of 25, our Henry X had frittered away the family fortune, running up millions of pounds of debts. He got another name, the King of the Plungers. A year later, his liver gave out. On his death, the family were forced to auction wines, art and the family estates to pay his creditors. Loudon Castle today is a shell overlooking a theme park complete with rides and wallabies to attract the masses. Suddenly, our alternative line had run slap bang into the real world. I realised that the real king or queen today probably wasn't some toff living in a stately home, but an ordinary person in a normal house. As I traced the last few generations, I found the truth. From the 20th century, there were more names and faces. Tragic deaths in both world wars that meant we should have had both a Queen Edith and, until last year, a Queen Barbara I. And then suddenly I was there. I couldn't quite believe it, but I had a name and an address for the person who should be ruling Britain today. In 1960, when the present occupant of Buckingham Palace was still in the first decade of her reign, a young man set sail from England. He was heading for a new life abroad. He didn't know it, but he was leaving his kingdom behind. Good morning. After discovering a flaw in the royal succession, I traced the line of true kings and queens that leads to the person who's Britain's real monarch. But he'd emigrated. The true heir to the throne was born in Britain, but now lives in the Australian outback. His name is Michael Hastings. Armed only with my family tree and my increasing obsession with the subject, I went to tell the man who should be King Michael I the good news. As I drove into Jerilderie, New South Wales, population 1100 plus one king, I began to realise how daft this might look. I knew he was in town. I'd phoned him from Britain and told him we were looking into the descendants of the Plantagenets, but otherwise King Michael was in the dark. 74, 12,000 miles, 2.5 days and a lot of jet lag, and I'm finally here. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure how to play this. I mean, if someone turned up on your doorstep and said, "Excuse me, do you know that you're the King of England?" you'd be a bit surprised, wouldn't you? Particularly if they had a director with them and a sound man and a cameraman. So I think what I'll do is I'll just talk to him about some of the facts first of all, relax him a bit, and then hit him with the real import of what we've got to say at the end.
G'day.
Hello, Michael.
Yes, come on in.
I'm Tony Robinson.
Hello, Tony. How are you?
This is our camera crew.
Come on in.
Thank you.
Would you walk?
Not from England, no. Michael, the reason that we've come over is that we've been doing a lot of research on the Plantagenets, of which you are...
one, yes.
A very distinguished one.
Very distant one too.
Just looking at the top bit, see, the kings of England, starting with Henry II and further back right to William the Conqueror and beyond that to Alfred the Great. I went over the now familiar pattern. Wars of the Roses, Clarence, Henry Tudor, and of course the missing link in the royal chain. All of that's okay, except that we now believe that Edward IV was himself illegitimate. Which means that Elizabeth was illegitimate, Henry VII was illegitimate anyway, so this whole Tudor dynasty is built on a lie. It means that you are the rightful King of England.
Well, there you are.
How do you feel about that?
Bloody awful, isn't it? I don't. Bit of a shock, isn't it? Bit of a shock.
Has it ever crossed your mind before?
No, it hasn't actually.
But you knew you were a Plantagenet.
Well, yes, I just said, oh yeah, well you go back so far and you, somewhere along the line, you're a Plantagenet, you know. But I didn't think it would work Well, I didn't know anything about this bit, the illegitimacy bit.
Yeah. Oh, wow. It turned out that Michael also had a family tree. He wanted to check my research, which luckily seemed to match completely.
There's
Theophilus.
Yeah, 1729 to 1789.
And then he had a son and a daughter, Frances. They were all there. Margaret the Martyr, Lady Flora, our gambling Henry X, as well as Michael's nearer relatives. She'd have been Edith the First.
12th Countess, yeah.
Then...
That's my great-grandmother.
That's your great-grandmother. That's your mother, Barbara.
Barbara Huddleston Henley Hastings.
Barbara would have been Barbara the First.
She died last year.